There is a secret society in this country that practices sorcery. Those people are found in Freemasonry. They're found in the Ku Klux Klan. They're found just all types of places. They're found in the FBI. They're found in the Secret Service. The three assassinations by the three assassins is part of it. The rocket trip is part of it. You had the killing of two Kennedys, and you had the killing of Martin Luther King. Now, in each death, I could hardly number them, but I can say there are hundreds of connected symbol patterns. The killing of the king is a symbol in alchemy. Now, the killing of the king was the destruction of primordial matter. The trail leading to the killing of the king is called the journey of death. It is also called the long journey of the alchemist. On the Giornata del Morto is the place that the atomic bomb was set off, where primordial matter was supposedly destroyed. That is at the Trinity site.
Hello, I'm Bill Grimstead, sometimes known as Jim Brandon. I'm joining here in 2017 with necessary updates and clarifications. A few people may recall me as the author of the books Weird America of 1978 and The Rebirth of Pan about 5 years later. Actually, a couple of years before I started on Weird America, I narrated this talking book, which I titled Sirius Rising, The Weird World of Mr. Downard. This was never marketed, but only passed out to a few correspondents. It eventually was laid aside while I was occupied with the other books. From time to time, I've been asked if I would make copies of these recordings available to those interested in the Shelby Downard phenomenon. I didn't get around to that until recently, with the rise of the exciting new concept of Synchromysticism. I'd like now to explore how that $20 word grew out of the Downard factor that I introduced here so long ago. What is synchromysticism? For that, I defer to Loren Coleman, a current leading student of anomalistics, or the study of phenomena that don't fit the materialist mindset and dogmatic scientism enforced by the present academic establishment. This critique was actually pioneered in the early 1900s in the writings of Charles Fort, which are still available in books and online searches. Loren credits one Jake Kotze, capital K-O-T-Z-E, as originator of the term in 2006. Kotze defined synchromysticism as, quote, the art of realizing meaningful coincidence in the seemingly mundane with mystical or esoteric significance, unquote. Loren's own idea is, quote, the exploration of twilight language is, in essence, a methodological approach employed by some or most researchers who practice synchromysticism. In many ways, I see synchromysticism as merely the old study of name games and Fortiana, wearing new post-Jake Kotze definition clothing. I don't feel the need to get bogged down by theories for the cause of synchronicity that is discovered in the meaningful relationships being investigated. All coincidences may have meaningful relationships, unquote. This is from Loren's Introduction to a Future Book of Mine, quote unquote, provided to me in April of 2017. But it was in his 2008 posting, Synchromysticism's godfather, on his Copycat Effect, that's one word, copycateffect.blogspot.com site, that Lawrence specifically credited Shelby Downard as the pioneer of this now widely ramified inquiry of almost unlimited breadth and depth. Interested listeners are urged to look further into Loren Coleman's intellectual treasure trove, accessible by entering his name, Loren, cap Coleman, on the usual online search functions. His many books are listed on the popular online booksellers. Now, it may have been noticed that I have retitled this production Sirius Rising, Mr. Downard and the Synchromystical Boson, cap Boson. So where do bosons come in? Well, the old kids game, button, who's got the button, might now be updated to boson, who's got the boson? I refer to the furthest fringes of hyper-high-energy physics research, where it was announced with great fanfare in 2012 that the subatomic Higgs boson, or God particle, yes, really, had been discovered. This is, quote, so fundamental that without it nothing could exist, unquote, meaning no matter could exist without it, apparently. Now, this occurred at the famed CERN labs in Switzerland, the ne plus ultra and crown jewel of the worldwide scientific enterprise. Amusingly enough, the whole brouhaha had been forgotten a short while later as yet another mystery particle was announced. Now, this contemporary scientific empire with characteristic hubris is attempting to resolve what it thinks are profound enigmas of dead matter with higher and higher voltages over longer and longer underground racetracks, which now run under more than one country over there. Yet, absurdly, their pursuit of the ultimate subatomic particle of mass, as they call matter, leads only to smaller and smaller particles and particles of particles. So, Loren Coleman and his elite circle are pushing beyond the ideas on basic synchronicity that were pioneered by psychologist Carl Gustav Jung. They have made the crucially necessary inclusion of the mystical dimension. Meanwhile, the CERN rat race folks are spinning their wheels until they can explain how certain names and places and numbers, not to mention twilight language, can trigger real-world phenomena ranging from the trivial and personal to the world historical. Frankly, I don't think they have a prayer. Well, obviously we're getting into deeper water here than anything contemplated by Shelby Downard, although who can say that with his amazingly fecund imagination and mental agility, he might not have relished the synchromystical idea. But now we rejoin his unique insights, even factoring in how alchemy, another hair-tearing anathema to the positivist rationalist crowd, enters into America Mystica.
On the Jornada del Muerto, you have one symbol after the other. And those symbols are then connected with symbols that lead you into the Apollo moon trip. You can start with Jules Verne's trip to the moon. There you find a statement that they're going to go to the moon from Cape Canaveral. Now, some people believe that the Palomar telescope is focused on Saturn occasionally. At certain time, these mystic rays came down, and some person or persons are able to be tuned in on that ray.
There was a time in the good old uncomplicated days, not so long ago, when talking too freely about sorcery or alchemy would have brought you a snicker or a sidewise glance, or perhaps worse. In fact, only a decade ago it was considered extremely bad form to suggest that there was anything more than one lone non-conspirator and one very talented rifle bullet behind the death of President John F. Kennedy. But that's all changed now. Every day, in practically every way, we're being exposed to new evidence that this world of ours is, like it or not, a rather strange place. Most difficult, probably, for those who still bow down at the shop-worn idol of human rationality is the increasingly probable possibility that some things are so mysterious or so infinite or infinitesimal that we may never understand them. Take the inner structure of the atom, for example, or the inner structure of the Central Intelligence Agency. In fact, we may have all we can do to grasp the mere outline or agenda of some of the things going on under the sun, let alone their cause or meaning. One of the most original and perceptive individuals whom I have encountered in my years as a newsman and investigator of the unusual was a man named James Shelby Downard. No doubt few listeners will have heard of him, for Mr. Downard was a very private person who had spent a lifetime working out an amazingly wide-ranging system of what he calls mystical toponymy. His concept is an effort to find hidden meanings, secret patterns, if you will, behind an amazingly wide-ranging and seemingly unrelated variety of persons, places, and political events. The following recording is edited from a series of taped conversations that I held with Mr. Downard in 1974 and 75. Of course, there are at least two sides to all complex questions, and before we begin, it seems appropriate to point out that Mr. Downard's numerous remarks about a certain well-known fraternal organization are a personal opinion to which he is entitled, but at the same time, one should bear in mind that bad individuals can, and usually do, get into any organization.
The whole, for instance, Kennedy assassination. Hell, there's a clear pattern, one right after the other. And anyone sees the pattern can't deny. They might say, well, I don't believe it, but they'd have to say it's the most fantastic thing they ever saw in their life. The assassination, the three assassinations by the three assassins is part of it. The rocket trip is part of it. But now, you had the killing of two Kennedys, and you had the killing of Martin Luther King. Now, in each death, there is a close-knit symbol pattern. In Kennedy's assassination, there, I can hardly number them, but I can say there are hundreds of connected symbol patterns concerning his death. A person might start out at the point of a man named Cover, Franklin Cover, appearing at the White House in the play Macbeth, shortly before Kennedy started out on his trip that led to the killing of the king, his murder, assassination. Picture I've got of Franklin Cover standing under a chandelier, say. Now, a chandelier is considered the standard test of a jettatore, a sorcerer, a person with the evil eye, in Italy. As you know, Macbeth was equated with sorcery. Right after Franklin Cover performed in the play Macbeth and took up his evil eye symbol underneath the chandelier. The Black Watch. Scotch boys came in and serenaded Kennedy. And here they are in their kilts, and I got a picture of them standing out in front of the place. Well, believe me, the Black Watch fits into the pattern. All right, now let's jump from there to a second to the fact that President Johnson was represented as MacBird, and MacBird was represented as Macbeth. See, now President Bain Johnson, the Bain family is of the Macbeth clan. The Bains, the Beans, and the Macbeth. Just like that, say. So now there's your tie with your President Johnson. But in this thing, I can't even leave out the Bouviers. I can't leave out the Radziwills, because the Radziwills were connected with the Hellfire Club. Miss Chudley lived with Prince Radziwill.
Miss Chudley, of course, was the official Great Whore, or Scarlet Woman, of Sir Francis Dashwood's Satanist Hellfire Club in 18th century England. She was, for a time, the concubine of Prince Radziwill of Poland, an ancestor of the husband of Lee Radziwill, sister of Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis. This club has been described in the Man, Myth, and Magic Encyclopedia and in a history by Daniel Mannix. The Hellfire Club included a large cross-section of the English power structure of the day, but our own nation was also represented. Our founding father and High Freemason Benjamin Franklin was a member in good standing. On the subject of Lyndon Johnson, we must point out that nowhere does Mr. Downard make accusation of crime or specific wrongdoing. He always stressed to me that his interest was merely the gathering and organizing of symbols and names. By the same token, no charge is intended that actor Franklin Cover is an Italian sorcerer. Only the presentation of his photograph, very conspicuously under the White House chandelier in a national picture magazine, has interest in and of itself as the recreation of an old symbol. One other intriguing snippet mentioned by Mr. Downard was the fact that the large conference table furnished for President Kennedy's meetings with his cabinet had a distinct coffin shape. In other words, its top had the shape of an elongated, irregular hexagon. A Scottish connection would seem to be implicit in the Macbeth and Black Watch references. It is perhaps unnecessary to point out the importance of that country in the occult sphere. Examples are very numerous, as any reference to the researches on witchcraft by Montague Summers or Charles Williams will show. For now, we will mention only the unique relationship with Scotland that was maintained by the chief practitioner of magic and Luciferianism in this century, the Englishman Aleister Crowley. At the very beginning of his strange career, Crowley journeyed to Scotland. There he spent a substantial part of his large fortune, establishing himself in baronial style in the castle of Boleskine. Some of the rituals he performed there are reputed to have driven innocent people living nearby to madness and suicide. But then the atmosphere must already have been rather unusual, since Boleskine House is dramatically perched above the waters of Loch Ness, home of the fabled monster. Later, Crowley wrote many rituals for the supposed summoning up of dark forces, which can still be read in his books today. He used the concept of Boleskine in Scotland as a sort of directional signal for the place from which certain of these sought-for energies were to be derived.
Well, now we can just take one symbol thing after the other, following that pattern till we get into mystical toponymy. Then you got the damnedest set of patterns, as bad as the atomic bomb pattern, the Jornada del Muerto. You've got Kennedy Mountain. You've got Johnson Mountain side by side. You've got Ruby Road leading up to them. You've got Kennedy Mountain up at the head of Hecate Strait. All you got to do is just draw a line right from the three sister mountains, get on the Tres Hermanos Mountains, and draw it right over into Arizona, and you come right smack to a symbol position on the Ruby Road running up to the thing there. There's a whole pattern. I'm just sketching and jumping around. Now just follow that line over a little south of Lordsburg. It would be possibly 32 degrees and 4-5 seconds. There's the old ghost town of Shakespeare with all of the, here I'll show you some pictures of it. Here's Shakespeare, New Mexico. They had the Stratford Hotel there, and it's a complete Shakespeare name pattern there. This is the Three Sister Mountains out in Zion Park where Johnson's daughter went. This is her caravan going to remember the Three Sisters in Macbeth? There's three sister mountains that are important. One is in New Mexico at Columbus, the Tres Hermanos. This one and the one up near Kennedy Mountains up in Alaska, say.
To be strictly accurate about that, Kennedy Mountain at the head of Hecate Strait is in the Yukon Territory of Canada, although the mountain chain does run through to Alaska. But now we move on to a further level in this pioneering study of the secret symbolism operating behind the stage of official politics and history. Let us set the scene with the book that President Kennedy read shortly before his journey of death to Dallas. According to historian William Manchester, Kennedy had just finished the book The King Must Die by Mary Renault, a book about the ritualistic killing of the ruler, which figures so largely in fertility folklore and in ancient alchemy.
The killing of the king is a symbol in alchemy. It is symbolized in alchemy. Of course, they have alternate symbols for things, but the prime symbol of the killing of the king is a crucified snake on a tall cross. Now, the killing of the king was the destruction of primordial matter. For the destruction of primordial matter to occur, all that is hidden has to be made manifest, according to the alchemists. The trail leading to the killing of the king is called the journey of death. It is also called the long journey of the alchemists, and I'm sure there are other names for the journey to the killing of the king spot. Now, on the Giornata del Muerto is the place that the atomic bomb was set off, where primordial matter was supposedly destroyed. That is at the Trinity site. Now you can pick up the true starting point, although on the map, any map of Mexico you get will show the Giornata del Muerto. But the Giornata del Muerto actually starts symbolically at the Kern Gate at Kern Place in the shadow of Crazy Cat Mountain. Now, Kern was a mason. The Kern clock, a clock that Kern supposedly gave to the Masons, now hangs in the Masonic Temple in El Paso. Now, Kern went up to Alaska, and there he preached to the Indians. Here you see Kern dressed in his robes preaching to the Indians, say. These are all Indians around here. Now, Kern brought a bunch of these Indians back here, the Indians with Kern, and they're building this gate of symbols, 1,000 symbols. Now, that gate is symbolical of the gate of death, the gate with 1,000 doors. Here is information on the gate of the 1,000 doors, right here on the thing. Now this is also picture family from the Kern book. The Kern book can be found in the El Paso Rare Book Department.
Mr. Kern is wearing odd ceremonial-looking robes in the picture of him preaching to the Indians, but he was apparently not a clergyman, and his exact reason for bringing Alaskan Indians to New Mexico to carve the huge Gate of 1,000 Symbols remains an enigma. The making manifest of all that is hidden, and the unusual name of the city near the White Sands testing ground, impress Mr. Downard as another odd coincidence. That city is Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. But whether or not there was anything symbolical in the selection of the name for the city, our interest should jump to a new order of magnitude when we remember the Truth or Consequences Society. It was that club in New Orleans which is supposed to have inspired District Attorney James Garrison to begin digging into Kennedy's killing. But isn't there a less imaginative explanation for the name of the Jornada del Muerto? In the old days, this was the trail that ran all the way from Santa Fe down into central Mexico. Possibly the name merely reflects the fact that this journey runs through some of the more severe terrain in the West, which no doubt proved deadly to many early travelers.
That's a logical explanation. People died, the trail of death, you see, a coincidence. And a person can also explain the Kern Gate by saying, well, he was a person interested in mysticism and he had a lot of money and he just wanted to do it for a lark. There are all types of explanations. This is the site of the first atomic bomb test right here, right smack dab on the Jornada del Muerto. That's the Trinity site. The Jornada del Muerto runs to Las Cruces, you see. And Las Cruces was named, symbolifies the three crosses. It was named after three crosses that were found there. Three crosses are a symbol in sorcery and witchcraft. This is the witch is in special in front of the three crosses. This is an advertisement still used at Las Cruces showing the three crosses. Las Cruces is about 32 and 30 seconds.
Another important master symbol in America Mystica, what little we can piece together of it, seems to be that of linear alignments. We touched on this briefly in connection with the Tres Hermanas symbol complex. But still another important latitude symbol arises with discussion of the atomic bomb, for it is readily visible on any reasonably detailed map that the Trinity site, where the first bombs were set off, was not only on the Jornada del Muerto, as Mr. Downard points out, but it was near the point where the Jornada, running roughly north to south, intersects the 33rd parallel of latitude, running east to west. We will have much more to say later about these numbers 33 and 32 and their apparent significance in occult numerology. For now, we will travel eastward on that 33rd line until we come to Dallas, Texas. To be exact, Daley Plaza, the site of the killing of the king, which lies about 10 miles south of the line. But the Trinity River does run very close to the place where John Fitzgerald Kennedy had his appointment with destiny.
The big metal bottle that cost a fortune to build, you see, that was supposed to have something to do with the atomic bomb, for a long time was at Genie Zorro. Genie Zorro means fox genie, as you know. Now, in Japan, they have a fox genie. And the fox genie always was supposed to hang around temple hondos. Hondo is the kind of little room entrance to the temple, you see. Incidentally, there's a hondo New Mexico. And up by Hondo, New Mexico, there is a cave. Now the Indians up in that section, and invariably at certain times of the year, dead foxes are brought and left. A Genizaro or Genizoro was supposed to be a half-breed Spanish Indian that was an orphan. It was a nickname for them. And this little town that this genie bottle was kept at for a long time was there. Now, the odd part about this, here's this expensive bottle. And at a certain time, for some reason or other, they decided to destroy that thing. And they set off explosive after explosive inside of it until finally they succeeded in destroying this thing that had cost a fortune.
Judging from newspaper accounts and pictures in Mr. Downard's files, the metal bottle was about large enough to contain 2 normal-sized human beings. And although there is no evidence at this point to prove it, he has it as a sort of private joke that this was probably intended as a homunculus bottle. In medieval alchemy, the theory was that out of the laboratory work would be produced a tiny mannequin, which, it was believed, would have enormous magical powers. We would not have included this frankly whimsical matter here were it not for an occurrence that has become fairly common knowledge in connection with Aleister Crowley's magical fraternity, the Ordo Templi Orientis, or Order of Oriental Templars. For the OTO chief in Southern California during the late 30s and the war years is now known to have attempted the magical making of a homunculus. He based his procedures upon Crowley's novel Moonchild, which concerned that very thing. This was John W. Parsons, who in the everyday world was an eminent scientific researcher at the California Institute of Technology, and it was his work in the field of rocketry, and his laboratory, later taken over by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, that laid the groundwork for the Apollo moon flights.
On the Jornada del Muerto, you have one symbol after the other. And those symbols are then connected with symbols that lead you into the Apollo moon trip. You can start with Jules Verne's trip to the moon. There you find a statement that they're going to go to the moon from Cape Canaveral. You can come over to the coast, and if you know how to find it, you can find that there was a railroad called the Celestial Railroad that ran down the coast, and that that Celestial Railroad went from one star town to the other. Venus, Jupiter, there's still several of the star towns left. And if you get old geodetic survey maps, you can find others. Say, Jupiter, Lake Worth was the whole name of the thing. And because it ran to these star towns, you see, and so forth, it was called the Celestial. Now you must remember that this is the place that is the site of Jules Verne's trip to the moon. And they finally settle on that spot. They debate the use in Texas. Now, the truth of the matter, you follow this line over and you get into a very strange toponymy pattern. Cape Canaveral had the name of Cape Kennedy. Now you follow that line over and you come to the Kingdom of Kennedy. The people that own the King Ranch, Kleber and Kennedy, were partners. All right, now, they busted up. And Kennedy had a ranch that was every bit as big as the Kleberg Ranch. And it was called, and you'll find it in history and everything like that, the Kingdom of Kennedy.
The Jupiter and Lake Worth was one of many railroads built by Henry Flagler, a millionaire promoter who had made a good deal of his pile in cahoots with John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust. It was from Rockefeller's University of Chicago that three prominent scientists traveled out to California early in this century and took over a floundering little technical high school, which apparently had nothing in particular to recommend it except that it was located in Pasadena, then as now one of the busiest headquarters for occult organizations in the entire country. And it was with their prestige, one of them became a Nobel laureate, and an unstinting supply of Rockefeller cash that they transformed the little school into what is now known as the California Institute of Technology. But now we travel back farther north, to that city with the Egyptian-sounding name that was the site of the other recent killing of the king, the Black King.
Memphis, of course, is in the Little Egypt area. The Mississippi River is equated in the minds of some people and mentioned many times as the Nile. Of course, it goes up to Wheeling, where your shrine of Osiris is, the shrine of death.
I pointed out that Wheeling, West Virginia, is on the Ohio River, not the Mississippi.
Oh yes, but tributary. See, we're following a line to Memphis. For instance, at the zoo, they've brought over these Egyptian artifacts, temple columns, and all kinds of stuff. I've got a number of pictures of things they bought. Yes, this Memphis is a symbol in Egyptian masonry. Yes, the rite of Memphis is an Egyptian thing.
The Rite of Memphis was a Masonic offshoot that at one time caused quite a commotion within the American and French Masonic bodies. Authorities differ on its significance. Some discount its importance in America. Others concede that it was at one time a serious rival to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry for control of that movement in this country. But the Confederate General Albert Pike is generally credited with securing the ruling place for the Scottish Rite in the post-Civil War years, when he moved its headquarters from Charleston, South Carolina, to the center of national political power in Washington, D.C. The full name of the offshoot was the Rite of Memphis and Mizraim, Mizraim being an ancient name for Egypt. The group is no longer officially in existence, but its memory lives on after a fashion in the several Egyptian city names that many people have wondered about in the lower Midwest area.
Ray is supposed to have shot Martin Luther King from a place that was a joint whorehouse. There was a Negro on one side, white on the other, and there was a bridge connecting the two houses in between, you see. And it was a house set up.
The idea of the whore is another important one in the black arts. We have mentioned the Hellfire Club's so-called Scarlet Woman, but right now, in our own day, the Satanic Church extols the concept of the Shady Lady, on whose naked thighs the Black Mass is performed. Likewise, Aleister Crowley's writings are full of ecstatic accounts of his sex magic workings with a series of trollops who traveled around with him. It is this context, fittingly, that was the scene of the killing of Negro leader Martin, alias Michael, Luther King. The secret system that runs the show used King for a time in its long campaign to agitate and inflame black people, but his scandalous personal immorality was partially exposed in a private spat with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who threatened King with recordings and motion pictures of his sex cavortings with a long string of white floozies. King's dignified pose as a model of righteous religious rectitude was badly compromised, and we can only infer, in the light of persistent evidence that he too was killed by a conspiracy, that King had become more valuable dead than alive. After he mentioned the joint Negro-white whorehouse from which James Earl Ray is officially supposed to have shot his rifle, I asked Mr. Downard if this was the Lorraine Motel mentioned in news reports.
Martin Luther King was at that spot, but that was a spot of an old whorehouse too. The Negroes marched down Mason Street to the Mason Lodge during the Sanitary March. A whore was supposed to have seen Earl Ray there. Now they've got her out at Bolivar Crazy House out there, you see. And there's an unusual pattern. It's at the Bolivar Crazy House, a western state it's called. Incidentally, there are western states all over the United States. There's a western state out in Oregon, see. And a western state seems to be a choice name for it. Now, it is at the Crazy House at Western State that the Masons have always had a Solomon Temple Lodge. For years had a hall there. Of course, the people didn't supposed to get in it, but they had a meeting spot that was with all the Masonic paraphernalia in it. It was an upstairs place over the carpenter shop. The regular meeting lodge that was over the carpenter shop, that's closed up now. But they meet now in the old building that some people term the Witch Building. It's one of the old style buildings that was built back, Civil War type. Now, they meet there now inside that building, you see. Of course, the meetings are always represented as a thing to help the people.
As far-fetched as it may seem to talk of insane asylums in this connection, the fact is that there is a long tradition of involvement with the insane by people engaged in occult and esoteric activities. The English writer and self-described magician Dione Fortune touched on this subject in many of her writings, and she was known to have been involved with a Mrs. Tranchell Hayes, famous in her day as England's foremost witch, and who actually lived in and reportedly experimented upon inmates of an insane asylum conducted by her psychiatrist husband. Mediums and other psychically sensitive people have often claimed to receive highly unusual, and in some cases extremely powerful, emanations from deranged people, or locations where such people have been kept. With this curious background of horror activities in Memphis, Mr. Downard begins to tell of his own extraordinary investigation of a woman, originally from Memphis, who he believes played the great whore role for a time among American sex magic groups.
She was a respectable lady like Madam Chudley. She didn't drink. She appeared very respectable, supposedly born at Parsons, Tennessee. Relative supposedly a social secretary in the White House, but supposedly a nice girl. She made the circuit, including the whorehouse where, but now none of this, there was no money involved in this. In other words, this wasn't a pay whore setup. I believe that she was groomed at a very early age for the role she was going to play. How early, I don't know. Now, outside of her looks, which were outstanding, there was nothing that set her apart from a moderately well-off family. She certainly was no junior leaguer or anything like that. The only connection with the higher strata of society would be this said relationship to Edith Helm, and that the fact that she f***ed all of the powerful Masonic socialites in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, she got into the occult somewhere along the line, but where she got into it, I don't know. She was on what I call a stud farm in Memphis, and it was a symbolical place of sex magic. Whether it is still in existence, I doubt. The truth of the matter is, I tried to expose this setup quite a number of years ago, and I ran into just so much trouble. It just is frightful. People that were connected with that thing also were connected with the baby black market. It was the Tennessee Children's Home. It was in control, run by Miss Georgia Tan, of an old Southern aristocracy family, see. Now, supposedly on the side, she was selling these babies to such people as June and her husband, Richard Dick, and so on and so forth. Quite a respectable list of people that she supposedly sold the babies to. They were going at $5,000 a crack. But the minute they would get it, then they came get these children, then they were influenced by the group.
The baby black market was written about in some detail by William Guy Carr in his book Red Fog Over America. Commander Carr, an ex-Canadian naval intelligence officer, contended that traffic in nameless children was a major activity of the secret political conspiracy group, the Order of Illuminati. The problem is by no means buried in the dust of bygone decades, however. It is still apparently very much with us, according to the New York Times for April 29, 1975. A long story in that issue bore the headline, quote, "Stringent Federal Law Backed to Halt Black Market in Babies," end quote. But what was the connection of the so-called Great Whore with this children's home?
She had many years ago been in that, she had been pregnant now, or supposedly pregnant. You see, I don't know whether she was performing a ritual in going there, but anyway, she was supposed to have been pregnant in that place. But she was taking part in the sex rites. The place was a place of symbolism. Yes, it was a Tennessee children's adoption place on the surface. Underneath it was a baby black market, but underneath that it had symbol impression. In other words, it was a palimpsest.
Some years ago, the woman moved from Memphis to the west, going first to Northern California.
She worked at the Tahoe Inn. Now from there she went to the Fairmont Hotel. They were cleaning her up then, see, in a big way, destroying her past and everything like that. And it was there that she married over in San Rafael. Alan Whitwer was the manager of the La Jolla, or the Del Toro Hotel. Then from there he went, when he supposedly fell out with Murchison, he went down and worked at the Cuyamaca Club. Then, as far as I was concerned, from there I couldn't find any trail of him.
More on Alan Whitwer in a moment.
I'm interested in the fact that General Hooker's house is over in North Bay. I'm interested in the fact that the wife of Solomon Gump is said to be a big house runner in San Francisco. Now, she appeared on Merv Griffin's program about 2 months ago, and she's now on the city council, supposedly at Sausalito. I'm interested in the fact that uh, the Gumps have a jade room, and with 48 kinds of jade. I'm interested in the fact that precious jade is a symbol that has to do with prostitution. I'm interested in the fact that these hookers that have their convention out there call themselves coyotes. I'm interested in the fact that Coyote Ranch was and still is at Palomar.
The so-called hooker conventions that have recently been held in San Francisco, the symbolism of the coyote, and Palomar Mountain bring us into the fascinating climax of James Shelby Downard's unique symbolical odyssey across America. The hookers purport to be a labor union for prostitutes. Their official name, COYOTE, is supposed to stand for, quote, cast off your old tired ethics, unquote. It is an obvious case of an acronym in which the slogan was tailored to fit a desired word. Why would the word coyote be selected? There are two major reasons. First, the people trying to legitimize the ideas of prostitution and general all-around sex extremism are unquestionably mixed up in witchcraft and the darker side of the occult in general. And it is a fact that the coyote is regarded as one of the chief satanic animals in the Western Hemisphere, just as its counterpart, the jackal, was in ancient Egyptian mysticism. Anton LaVey lists it as a diabolical familiar in his book The Satanic Bible. The second reason for picking such a name could possibly relate to the fact that there is a Coyote Indian reservation near Mount Palomar, with very few Indians living on it, by the way. And this Palomar connection, if there is any, would most probably relate to Downard's mystery woman, who, as we shall see, is believed to have a rather special relationship with Mount Palomar.
Whether you believe in ley lines or any mystical significance in them or not, the fact is that there are certain spots that we'll call sensitive spots that have symbolical relation to certain things. And the San Diego area and certain places in San Diego on the coast there are highly symbolical in magical sexualis, sex magic. Now, some people believe that the Palomar telescope is focused on Saturn occasionally. I have been trying to find a reason for the Palomar visit that's made, see. And so I made the rounds of quite a list of the cultists out there. Of course, they were against it, but at a certain time the thing was focused on Saturn, and these mystic rays came down through the telescope, and some person or persons are able to tune in on that ray or be tuned in on that ray. The trips that took to Palomar may be a coincidence. But with all of these other things, it's interesting to me. Now, I went so far as I moved out to the Orange Court tourist court that is right when you go into the valley to go up to Palomar. A crony of the Great Whore tried to run me off the road on my way to Palomar. Oh, I'd been following me all over town. I'd been spotting them, you see, following me. They were using CB to follow me, you see. And I'm one of these, I'm a man of retrospect. I continually look in that rear view mirror, you see. Well, I come up on the road, and here this rat makes a run for me. Now, a person might say, well, and I've seen it done, these hot rodders, you know, do that type of thing. They don't mean anything by it. They're playing, they're joking, you see. But through sheer luck, I guess, maybe, I braked, and he went past, and I came in by him and pushed him right up on the edge of the mountain there. I was tempted real hard to push him over, see. And about that time, the great whore and a coterie of her pimp crowd passing the car, coming from Palomar.
We will have much more to say in Part 2 of this recording on the possibilities that certain individuals might have been irradiated with the great 200-inch telescope on Mount Palomar. For now, however, we will merely point out several facts. First, the Mount Palomar Astrophysical Observatory was built and continues to be operated by the California Institute of Technology. Second, Caltech was the base of operations of rocket scientist Jack Parsons, who was also the U.S. chief of Aleister Crowley's pro-Satanist Order of Oriental Templars. Third, Crowley's followers in Southern California dedicated an OTO temple near Mount Palomar many years before the telescope complex was installed there. Fourth, Mr. Downard's great whore was born in Parsons, Tennessee. The third Earl of Parsons built one of the world's largest telescopes of its day at Parsonstown, Ireland in the 19th century. His grandfather, the first Earl of Parsons, was a co-founder of the Irish branch of the Hellfire Club, and even today one of the leading designers and builders of large telescopes is the firm of Parsons and Grubb at Newcastle, England. Fifth, Mount Palomar is very close to the 33rd parallel of latitude. Finally, Jack Parsons, the Caltech scientist, was known to have been obsessed with the idea of the Great Whore, or Scarlet Woman, mentioned in the final passages of the biblical book of Revelation. In one of his last writings, Parsons declared to the world, and we quote, "Babylon, the whore of Babylon, is incarnate upon earth today, awaiting the proper hour of her manifestation. And in that day my work will be accomplished, and I shall be blown away upon the breath of the Father." End quote. Not long afterward, a mysterious explosion in his laboratory in Pasadena did blow away Jack Parsons. And now back to the woman Mr. Downard has dubbed the Great Whore.
Now the odd part about that, on her arm she wore a number of men's wristwatches. Really? Now that's the second time I had seen her with these men's wristwatches on her arm. Certainly it must have been some type of symbolism, see? But what I don't know. There were no signs on the door, no telephone listing. Now, she'd been there for quite a number of years. Why would a dress shop, a little dress shop, she'll be so damn exclusive that you'd have an unlisted phone number for it? Quite apparently, it takes a lot of money to maintain her and put on the front that was put on. But at the same time, there is the pretense of the working with the dress shop. In fact, the truth of the matter is, I know where a great deal of the money came from that set her up. But that is one thing I won't mention on tape. Let's say that there were certain people who apparently that I can't directly connect. Now some of them I can connect with directly with the invisible empire setup, but some I can't, and I think that great pressure was brought to bear on those people for money through the Georgetown black market, baby black market. The fact is, people involved had babies from the black market. Now, at a certain time, I know she was to go through this change, this Phoenix change. It was supposed to have started in Phoenix, Arizona, where the past had supposedly been cleaned up, smothered, you see. And like the great whore Miss Chudley at one time, the Hellfire. She was being polished up for great respectability. J. Edgar Hoover, Knight Templar J. Edgar Hoover, supposedly checked the party list of every party in Washington, D.C. before he would even attend, so he wouldn't be in any way in contact with disreputable people. Now that's a matter of record. Whether it's so or not, that's a matter of record, see. All right, now. J. Edgar Hoover went out to La Jolla, a matter of record, the story goes, to play the races and to be the guest of Murchison. All right, now the manager of the hotel for a time was Alan Whitwer, you'd say. All right, Alan Whitwer, according to the record, was married to... Here we got the two side by side. It makes for a most unusual setup.
We can read some of the further adventures of Alan Whitwer in Hank Messick's book John Edgar Hoover. Oddly enough, according to crime expert Messick, the same was true of many of the other $100-a-day guests who used to gather periodically at the Hotel del Charro and hobnob with the redoubtable Chief G-Man and commie fighter FBI Director Hoover. Journalist Jack Anderson, in a column published September 22, 1971, revealed that Hoover's visits alone sometimes cost Murchison as much as $15,000 each.
Yeah, it is a matter of record that she was there at the time Hoover was there. He had a little apartment, a little cottage set up there. There's several of them on the grounds. Her living quarters was a suite right by the cottage setup. Hoover is Knight Templar. Now, the great whore was long practicing sex magic. Of course, the Knight Templars for ages have been up in their neck, according to history and that type of thing. Federal bureaucratic inverts protected her all along the line, and I am sure that her installation in the Hotel del Charro and subsequently in the Rancho Santa Fe has been an arranged thing, see. And there's no question about it. I had pictures of her with FBI agents at the Hotel del Charro. Now, they were very respectable pictures. They were pictures of her child in the swimming pool. The swimming pool was entirely deserted except for an FBI agent, the child, and the great whore, see. I had those highly respectable pictures. First place, very unusual that the swimming pool should be deserted with only 3 people.
What does it all mean? From the encyclopedic array of persons and phenomena that Mr. Downard has placed under his magnifying glass, what can be concluded? As we said earlier, he does not make accusations, nor does he draw hard and fast final conclusions, at least to others. But it would seem that at least one basic inference is tenable, if there is anything to this line of inquiry at all, and if even a few of the apparent symbol complexes we have briefly sketched are anything other than an amazing jumble of coincidences. There is a working hypothesis we might tentatively accept pending further investigation, and that is that somehow, or through someone, a process bearing many of the symbolical hallmarks of medieval alchemy is being applied, unasked and unannounced, to the people of America. This idea is not as far-fetched as it might at first seem. Practically all writers on the subject point out that the alchemist's object was not so much to convert base metals into gold as it was to convert the alchemist himself into an allegedly higher form of man. There seems to be no reason why the concept could not be broadened to include whole peoples or national groups. An inkling of the character of this higher man might be gained from the fact that the so-called magnum opus, or great work of alchemy, was supposed to be the creation of the androgyne, or bisexual man.
The androgen rules over the conjunction of opposite, rules over the change of era time, you see. And it's quite interesting
like
that like this change of era time, the hippies with the long hair and bisexual practices and so forth show up this change of era time. The alchemist dragon, Nagari, Nagari, is represented as the Ouroboros, a symbol of primordial strength, and as an androgen. This, incidentally, is a symbolical picture of Nagari. Now, incidentally, the conjunction of opposites represented by an androgyne or hermaphrodite indicates a polarity of forces. You see, as an androgen, male and female in one body. That set of symbolisms is also part of your atomic bomb rite. Now, remember, individuation is the uniting of the good and the bad, of the black and white. And the banner of the Knight Templars is half black and half white. It is a banner of individuation. It is so-called Phoenix banner. This is the phoenix and the question of the thing that flies or carries its dead to Solomon's temple.
The Knights Templar, in this case, is not the modern Masonic subdivision to which J. Edgar Hoover belonged, but the medieval Catholic order that got involved in so many strange occult activities, including alchemy, according to some experts. Individuation is a term used by psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung to describe the process by which opposing tendencies of all kinds are reconciled in the forming of a complete human personality. Jung's research convinced him that alchemical concepts seem to be a built-in part of man's mental structure, whether the person in question knows anything about alchemy per se or not. The carrying of the previous phoenix to Solomon's temple is one tradition connected with this ancient mythological bird that was supposed to burn itself alive and be born again within the flames that consumed it. This idea would of course parallel the announced goal of the Knights Templar and their modern successors, the Freemasons, to rebuild in all its fabled glory the Jewish world capital in Jerusalem. In this strange and terrible era we live in, we have seen the creation and spreading all over the world of the diabolically devastating force of nuclear energy. We have seen the onset of a frightening series of strategic assassinations among public figures. We have looked on in confusion and consternation at a correspondingly sharp degeneration of public and private morality. But one chapter in this dubious chronicle is yet to be completed, since its principles are presumably still working out their peculiar destinies. Or should we say that Patty Hearst and her cohorts of the Symbionese Liberation Army are still acting out the uncannily symbolic roles that someone or other plotted out for them.
We were talking about that Phoenix, weren't we,
Yeah.
the Phoenix paper out there in San Francisco, and we were talking about it, and then she comes out and says she's a Phoenix.
What was this?
Patty Hearst said she was a Phoenix. We were talking about the Phoenix symbolism, and then she came over the radio a few days later that she had been like a Phoenix, had been reborn, and that was real weird.
What do you think of that seven-headed cobra or whatever it is they've got?
Naga.
Naga? Nagas, of course, are related half and half with the Garudas. And the Garudas are the reptilian birds, you see, equated with the phoenix, you see. The phoenix, as you know, is part reptile. Well, for instance, remember the history. When he burns himself, when she burns herself up, she appears as a worm, a snake salamander, you see, from the ashes.
Have you heard about the tie-up of the CIA has this Phoenix, in the Phoenix assassination squad that in Vietnam, and the Phoenix thing in the SLA?
Now remember, the man who was supposed to be head of the Phoenix assassination in Vietnam is out at Vaca, you see.
Well, Vacaville.
Vacaville, see.
Is he really?
So there's where you pick up your Phoenix pattern again.
They have a Hotel Phoenicia where they hire all the people that work at the CIA for the Middle East, or hire a lot of them. The Hotel
I
Phoenicia
wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
in Lebanon, which is Phoenicia, anyway.
Conspiracy researchers have discovered that it was at the Frankensteinian Behavior Modification Center, operated by the CIA in conjunction with the California Department of Corrections at Vacaville, that Donald Sink DeFries, alleged mastermind of the Symbionese Liberation Army, had his little brain washed and programmed. Whether Patricia Hearst was really kidnapped and converted to some sort of Marxist phoenix, or whether the whole thing was somehow prearranged, remains conjectural. In the second part of this recording, in which we attempt to analyze in greater depth some of this wide-ranging symbolism we have discussed, we will have much more to say about a curious fact that we will simply state here. The official shield of the Central Intelligence Agency bears the likeness of the head of the American eagle. But the likeness ends there, for the bird is really intended as a phoenix. In fact, and there is no question about it among the initiated, the American eagle, as it appears on the Great Seal, is itself a phoenix. Well, where do you think the central headquarters of all this is?
Washington is honeycombed with tunnels.
Yeah,
And I would be inclined to believe that there is a central headquarters somewhere underneath Washington, D.C.
You think of the Pentagon, the whole idea of the five-sided witches.
Well, of course, there's all types of Pentagon makes a pentagram, and there's all types of Masonic symbolism connected with it.
The tunnels of Washington could make an interesting study in and of themselves, but as the subject is complex and interconnected with other matters, we will defer discussing it until Part 2 of this recording. The Pentagon, along with the Washington Monument obelisk, the Masonic cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol building, the iconography of the U.S. Great Seal, and so on and so forth, has always been a conspicuous example of cryptic occultism at work. The reason for the selection of a five-sided structure would remain unintelligible for those who are unaware that in ritual magic the pentagram is supposed to be a defensive figure that protects itself from or wards off attacking enemies. It is the emblem for the god whom the Jewish Kabbalists call Barzabel, better known in the Greco-Roman pantheon as Mars, the god of war. So, along this line of thought, it is easier to understand why those who apparently take such symbolism seriously should have settled on a pentagon as headquarters for the Supreme Military and Naval Command. Finally, we should note that the Army commander who supervised the design and construction of the Pentagon, General Leslie Groves, had as his next assignment a highly secret project in which we have also seen certain symbolism, the creation of the first atomic bomb.
The Greeks call the runs, which are produced in the outer part of the honeycomb, castros. That's a copy of the bestiary, too.
That really fits in.
Oh, yes.
Outside the hive.
Outside the hive, see?
I had asked Mr. Downard what he thought about the Order of Illuminati, the 18th century sect of occultists and political conspirators who are supposed to have stage-managed the French Revolution behind the scenes. They were reportedly suppressed by the Bavarian government, although of late there has been speculation among even liberal avant-garde thinkers that the Illuminati may still be very much alive. This is probably not attributable to the handful of all but unread right-wing books on the subject that have been around for decades. Rather, it springs from the writings and doings of our old friend Aleister Crowley. Among his many grandiose titles was that of, quote, Custos, or custodian, of the Illuminati in North America, unquote. The Illuminati's alternate name, in German, was the Bienenorden, or Order of Bees. This reflected their dedication to restructuring society on the basis of a busy little Soviet-style hive, with a robotized humanity cheerfully laboring away among a welter of six-pointed Star of David cells. By way of answer to my question, Mr. Downard handed me a copy of T.H. White's A Book of Beasts, opened to the chapter on bees. We could say a lot about the man who goes by the name of Fidel Castro. We could allude to his ambiguous origins. We could point out that some of his Third World friends claim he is originally from the Middle East, not from Latin America. We could delve in more detail into the exact impetus of his communist regime, including his mysterious ties with U.S. crime emperor Meyer Lansky, who ruled Cuba through dictator Fulgencio Batista before Castro. We could make a very long list of secret and not-so-secret U.S. agents who engineered Castro's rise to power. But most of all, in studying this symbolical drone bee outside the secret American hive, we would want to learn his exact role in the alchemical killing of a king in 1963.
What do you make of all these people killed in the Kennedy, the witnesses that were subsequently turned up
I don't know.
up their toes, you know?
I don't know. I don't know. But something you all know, and I know, that something frightful has been going on for a long time.